That's a bingo! Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just say bingo.
Bingo! How fun!
All right, we are back. It is week 4 of the That's a Bingo podcast. My name is Jake Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Pine. Week 4, man. We're a month in.
Yeah, glad to be here. This is going to be a Coen Brothers laced episode.
Which, that always plays well with me. I don't know if it always plays well with you, but it does seem, it does seem like it does. I mean, this is your pick, so I'm not going to totally steamroll you.
Yeah, one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies. I think this was the first one that I actually enjoyed during my quarantine watch list that I hadn't seen before. It is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
It certainly is the 2000 slapstick crime comedy drama depression era musical type thing. I don't know exactly what category to put it in, but you announced it as a pick that we were going to be doing for this week. I don't know if that's what I was totally expecting, but how do you know what to expect anyway with this? And I came away very, very pleased with it.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing Tarantino movies every week. We've only done one so far, but we like to pick ones that we enjoy. So we hope you enjoy it as well.
In fact, there's only 9 of them, so we're probably going to have to space them out over what I would hope is a long period of time, because we've already done one. So
yeah, we're definitely we were on pace there for quite the string in a row, but I think we're going to slow the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, we certainly are. But we're going to have plenty on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou soon. I mean, starting things off, man, what have you been watching in the past week since we've gotten together?
I have been watching a few films. This is actually, I guess it's almost 9 days since we last recorded. So got several in there. First one I want to talk about is Seven Samurai. It is a Japanese film from 1954. Pretty widely regarded as one of the best movies of all time. Really enhanced and created the action drama. Definitely would highly recommend, especially if you are a film buff such as Jake and myself. Big fan. Really took a look at Groupthink, and kind of relevant today still. I don't think that ever really goes away.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very intrigued by the Japanese, film scene. I haven't really jumped into it too much. Like I mentioned, I watched Ip Man a couple weeks ago. That's Chinese, I believe. So it's obviously a little bit different, but it's a kung fu movie. I guess sort of similar in influence. I mean, they're both, Eastern theater type deal. But intrigued to check that out. I've also been playing a little bit of Ghost of Tsushima on PS4, which is heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa, a very famous Japanese director, and that has kind of made me wanted to go ahead and check out some of his movies. I don't know if they're anything similar to what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar. I am, fascinated to bring it back to Tarantino with the whole Kill Bill, series. Those 2 movies, definitely heavily influenced by the Eastern Asia genre. So, it's fun to get into some foreign films. Cool.
What else have you been checking out over there?
I watched Palm Springs finally got around to it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really enjoyed it. I actually went into it with pretty low expectations. Not that I heard, necessarily bad reviews about it, but it was kind of like a playoff Groundhog's Day. Kind of thought, they can't really get too creative with it. I was thoroughly impressed with it. I think the acting by, what's her name? Kristen Milioti.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's actually in Fargo, actually. But she's phenomenal. Really enjoyed it. Kind of put a different spin on it. Andy Samberg, J.K. Simmons. Don't know if you have any thoughts on it, but I was impressed. 8.5, 8.6.
Yeah, I saw it pretty much on a whim out of nowhere. I think I had helped my brother move into his new place that day that I saw it. And he and his roommate and friend had been watching it the night before. And they were apparently liked it, but for whatever reason had turned it off, so they just flicked it back on. I had no idea about it really. I think I had heard a little bit about like the premise and everything leading into seeing it, but even them mentioning like the name and like pulling it up, I didn't know what it was. So started watching it kind of on a whim out of nowhere. Really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like a 7.7. That might have been. I might go back and readjust it if I watch it again. I feel like it's a movie that would reward a rewatch. But yeah, it's sort of the take on the Groundhog Day thing. There's not really a whole lot you can do with that outside of the parameters that Groundhog Day set 30 years ago or whatever at this point. But I think they did do a good job of giving it sort of a modern or even postmodern kind of mindset, where with Groundhog Day, you know, there's kind of some spirituality stuff and stuff that was maybe a little bit more baked into the mindset of people in like the 80s or 90s. This felt like a very modern, kind of refreshingly modern take on it, where the Sandberg character is like kind of a nihilist and kind of a weird guy. And like, for better and worse, I think that kind of reflects our society in a way. And it shows how he can kind of change and move forward and become more of a positive person from that, which I like that message a lot. So yeah, big fan of Palm Springs.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. Very heavy nihilism themes, which can kind of be a bummer, but you know, I think they made it work and they put a fresh take on it. But another movie I've been seeing, The Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal. I know I was talking to you a little bit about it, kind of like the modern day Taxi Driver. Gyllenhaal just puts on the performance of a lifetime.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like when I first saw it, man, I for whatever reason, maybe I wasn't even like super as into movies 5 years or 6 years ago at this point as I am now. I don't know like how much I had been tracking Gyllenhaal's career, but I mainly knew him as a guy from like Jarhead and a guy from what else has he done? Like he was great in Source Code, which came out a little bit before that. And just kind of a likable everyman type of leading man. Turns out he's kind of really not that. Like he's obviously a very good guy and, you know, very interesting, but I didn't know he kind of had the depth that he brings to this character, Lou Bloom, which I actually did start watching this, I think 2 nights ago.
Okay.
I think I stopped halfway through. I've already seen it a couple times, but you brought it up. I saw it on Netflix, just flicked it on. And yeah, he just brings this weird kind of psychotic depth to it. I think the idea for conceptualizing the character is that he's supposed to kind of like look and act like a wolf or like a coyote. And I think watching like his physical appearance, the way he's slimmed down and just really committed to the act, I kind of like it when guys do that. I kind of dislike it other times, a little hit or miss. I think it works perfectly for this. He is able to pull off the sort of charming, sort of creepy, don't really know where he's coming from, you know, sociopathic character that he is in the movie. So without really giving away too many more details, I recommend anyone listening to just go check it out on Netflix. Nightcrawler from 2014. It's got obviously Gyllenhaal, like we mentioned, the late great Bill Paxton. I think it's one of his last movies. Riz Ahmed from Rogue One, The Night of, a bunch of stuff is in it. So yeah, really, really cool movie. Kind of one of those original concept movies that you don't see a ton of, but I feel like when they come out of nowhere. They hit really big, and this is a great example of one of the great movies of the 2010s that we're going to have to talk about more deeply at some point.
Yeah, I think we'll do that list in the near future. I think the loner type character is becoming a little bit more prevalent. Obviously, we saw that with Joker, and Joaquin Phoenix also extremely thin in that film. So yeah, I think it's going to be more and more prevalent. I think as people are getting more into the digital age, as it were, I think it's going to ring true for a lot more people. And then next, and I believe last movie I want to talk about is The Lobster. Don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've heard of it. I've definitely heard.
It's a weird. It's a really strange. It's really strange. It's with Colin Farrell, who's actually talking in his normal Irish accent, which I'm not necessarily used to.
So like in Bruges, Colin Farrell.
Yep, exactly. Directed and screenplayed by Yorgos Lagamos. I'm probably butchering his last name, but kind of a visionary. I actually just wrote the blog up on our website about this movie, just doing a review. Basic premise is it's a society set in the near future where basically couples are necessary. Like if you're single, you can't be part of society. So they send you away, and if you don't find love within 45 days, you get turned into the animal of your choice. And Colin Farrell's character David chooses the lobster, because they live for 100 years, and just really strange. It looks at like love dynamics. It looks at like assimilation. It's just it's kind of strange, but I think the concept really works.
Tell that to the lobsters up in Maine. Am I right? But yeah, okay, that's intriguing. I can't even visualize what that would be like, but maybe I'll have to check it out. What is it streaming on?
It can be found on Netflix and I believe Amazon. So
how did you arrive to it? How did you come to it?
I've talked about it before. I subscribe to this YouTube channel called Cinefix, and they do different theme videos. They do like best movie sets of all time. They'll do like best camera shots. They do best original plots or best original screenplays, and this was just one of them included. So thought I'd check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I had a pretty big week movie-wise as well. Rewatched a couple, saw I think 3 new ones that I have written down here. So on my rewatches, I think we already talked about Mad Max Fury Road last week, but I wanted to take another look at it as one of the best films of the last 5 years. So just rewatched that, solidified it again as one of the best action movies ever, and certainly one of the best films of the last 5 years. Rewatched for the first time in a very long time Jurassic Park on Netflix.
Ooh, I've not seen that one in probably 10 plus years.
It had been even longer than that for me, and I was probably a little concerned that it wasn't going to hold up, but I know a lot of people have said that it does, so maybe that was a little bit of misplaced concern, and I think it pretty much wound up being that because it holds up as one of those movies that as a kid you're watching, you think it's the coolest thing ever, and then you come back to it as an adult and you find a bunch of different reasons to find it cool and a lot of different things that you really enjoy about it. One of the cool tidbits of it, I think, came out in 1993, and it's one of the first movies to really heavily use CGI, and they do it pretty damn effectively. Like there are some examples of really bad CGI movies, looking at you, actually looking at you, Star Wars prequels, which came out like 10 years later, which uses CGI pretty atrociously. This uses it very well in bringing these massive dinosaurs to life, and not doing a very bad job of it at all. So hat tip to you, Steven Spielberg, and everyone that made that movie.
Completely random note, but also concerning Jurassic Park. The original owner of the Toronto Raptors named Jurassic Park as his favorite movie, hence naming the team the Raptors.
Dude, there's been, I think I might have listened to the rewatchables after the fact, or maybe I heard it somewhere else. There's another pod network I listened to that broke it down recently too, which I think that's why I watched it, is I wanted to listen to that episode. But they made the point that nobody benefited more from that movie coming out than the Raptor. The Raptor, the Toronto Raptors, everything is a Raptor these days.
Yeah, for the Raptors. That's very true. It's a good good spin zone on history. They were probably the most hated, dinosaur. So
they must be. It's an interesting device they do where they're pretty much the antagonist of the movie. The T-Rex actually kind of not. So that's intriguing. I'm sure we'll do that movie at some point, maybe some sort of summer blockbuster type deal that we do, because that's another thing that it's sort of revolutionized, which is nice. First time watches, I think you're going to like my list here.
Okay.
So I started with Being John Malkovich.
Yep. Thoughts on that?
Talk about a movie, like you were talking about The Lobster, like talk about a movie that you can go into not knowing what to expect, not knowing how it's going to play out on the screen, even though you have some premise of the story, you don't know what it's going to look like.
Yep.
You get into it, you're watching it, you're thinking, what the fuck the entire time. You walk out of that, and you still really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like an 8.6. Really liked John Malkovich.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of getting into those high concept type movies. I rated it probably lower than I should have. It was like in the mid 7s for me. Definitely should have bumped it up a little bit more. I do like Spike Jonze, the director. He also directed Her. With Joaquin Phoenix. So, probably worth a rewatch at some point in time.
Yeah, I think Spike Jonze big in the skateboarding scene actually too, which, I was a big skater back in the day. So good for Spike Jonze. So enjoyed that. John Cusack, hilarious in it. Malkovich, awesome in it.
Catherine Keener in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, just Malkovich though, man, like solidifies him as a dude that I would just absolutely want to get a beer with. As one of the great actors of the 90s and early 2000s. Second one that was new to me was King of New York.
Great movie. Not actually a great movie, but it's just one of those all-timers.
Not a great movie. Let's just get that out there. But it's pretty sick at the same time.
It's sick.
It's 1990, right?
Yeah. Jesus, it's Christopher Walken, Larry Fishburne, David Caruso before he got big. Just a huge cast of characters. Just very quotable as well. I'm sure we will do that at some point.
White Man Can't Jump. Wesley Snipes is in it.
Yep.
Emmy's in it for a hot minute there. Just an
Samuel L. Jackson.
Just an absolutely ridiculous movie. That like, and I think it kind of came to prominence because of Quentin doing that rewatchables and bringing it up as one of the movies that he really looks back on fondly, and he talks about it like it's a classic. And like, I believe him, and I don't like totally discount his opinion on it or anything. But that's the exact type of movie that, like, when you talk about Quentin taking something that everyone sort of disliked and turning it into something high concept or high prestige, that's sort of the original form of that. And then he takes it and turns it into something better. But having said that, the bones of like a Tarantino movie is essentially how I would describe it. And even that is better than a lot of other stuff. Very entertaining, very stylish. I think Abel Ferrara does enough stuff with it that really he's able to put his own print on it with all the neon lighting and like the cool style and like Walken doing the crazy dancing and everything. I just found it really an enjoyable watch, if a little confusing and kind of not totally all the way there in every aspect. It's at least very stylish and a fun watch for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's the case with some of the movies that I enjoy. I enjoy them, but they're not necessarily, great movies, upper echelon movies. I really like Armageddon, objectively an awful movie, but it's extremely entertaining. But yeah, with King of New York, I think you can look at True Romance, which came out, I believe, 2 or 3 years after this one. Very similar shootout scene. So I took that from King of New York. Also, I want to know if Christopher Walken's dance influenced Leo's dance in Wolf of Wall Street.
I think it must have. I had that same thought in watching it. I don't know where it came from for Walken. I feel like he'd always kind of great sort of like guy who likes to sort of command the screen a little bit in a very serious way, but he really let loose there in that 40 seconds or whatever. And it might be my favorite Chris Walken moment among a litany of favorite Chris Walken moments over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I think he might have 2 of the most legendary Tarantino scenes ever in True Romance and Pulp Fiction, and he's only in those 2 scenes. So it speaks for itself, I guess.
Which I think this movie was probably very influential for that, because he's great in bits and pieces of it. He's I don't know, you kind of don't really know what he's going for in other aspects of it, but he says, you know what, I can definitely write a couple bangers for this guy, and he does so with the watch scene and the Sicilian scene that you're referring to. They're both very good in their own right. Check out True Romance if you haven't. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've seen Pulp Fiction, but not necessarily true so for True Romance. So check that out, which obviously that was also influenced by King of New York as well. So yeah, other than that, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was the other one that I've seen, and we will be getting into that.
We shall. In due time. I do believe we'll be moving on to our new segment that we do every week, just looking at the latest in pop culture and movie news. Jake, do you have anything to start us off?
So we've been tracking the release of Tenet for pretty much since the start of this podcast.
The duration of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So it started to roll out. It looks like mostly positive reviews is what I wrote down. I think I saw one negative one that kind of bemoans the lack of humor in it, which, I'm not going to judge whoever wrote that. It's kind of looking at like a Nolan movie. You probably shouldn't be expecting there to be a ton of humor.
Dunkirk isn't exactly a barrel of laughs.
Yeah, but I think so. In defense of the guy a little bit here, there are some winks and like Inception's a fairly serious movie, but there are some winks and nudges. Like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character seems to have a lot of fun with like the concept of what they're doing with the dreaming stuff. I think the Tom Hardy character is, he kind of provides some comic relief. So I sort of get where he's coming from with that. And having not seen the movie, I'm not totally going to judge his take, but it seems maybe a little out of left field as the thing that you're singling out with a movie that features still yet to be fully understood time travel mechanics.
Yeah, I'm just really hoping it's a 2.5 hour flick. I'm hoping that it's kind of expressed in a understandable way. I think I saw some various reviews. I think I saw Rotten Tomatoes around like 86%, which is that's pretty solid. But obviously, I think the international release, I want to say, is tomorrow, August 26th, and then the American release is September 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, I think the my favorite tweet about it was from Fantasy. Somebody was asking if you were going to be discussing it on the big picture. He said, "We did it last year. It's coming out in 2018, and you can hear it on Napster, my iPod, or wherever you get it." Which pretty much sums up the feelings on it.
Yeah, it was like your one tweet. You were something about Tenet. I said maybe you already reviewed it 5 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I think I started to see the reviews coming out, and I was like, oh, okay, like I'll check some of these out. And basically, my whole thing with this is I'm just going to form my own opinion. I'm not going to look into these reviews. I'm just going to watch the movie, form my own opinion, and then you kind of came back at me with the Michael Scott saw Inception, or at least I dreamt I did, at the sponsor, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, I think you were when I first brought this up on episode 1, you were a little taken back, I think is a fair way to put it. But I think you're warming up to it a little bit now and anticipating it, I should say.
So here's the thing. I'm not like it's not a negative thing. Like I've always been very excited for this movie. It just seems like we're getting to maybe a little bit of a breaking point with Nolan, like doing the Nolan thing. You know what I mean? Like just getting exceptionally meta, exceptionally like kind of weird, but also sort of taking it all very seriously, like we mentioned with that guy's review there. But I've always been excited. I'm going to continue to be excited. I really like both of the lead actors in it. I love Nolan, obviously. You know, some of his movies are a little strange and high concept. I think even like Interstellar, which manages to get super fucking weird and like has McConaughey doing like the McConaughey thing floating in the Tesseract and like whatever the fuck. I still really like it. So like we're gonna see what happens. I'm pumped. I think I'm going to like it, and I don't want it to be misconstrued that like I'm dissing on it. I just think it's the whole idea around it is just very funny and entertaining to me.
Yeah, it's different, that's for sure. But like you mentioned, I think John David Washington is starting to prove himself a little bit, not necessarily in the shadow of his dad anymore, and I think that's a good thing. Although he can sound
so John David, right. You're going to go ahead and forge your own career here. All right,
my boy, that's my boy. He can sound exactly like his dad, though. I've heard that.
I got to see more of his stuff. I've seen him. I mean, he pretty much broke out on Ballers, it feels like, which I watched the first season of that, really disliked it, didn't return to it.
Zero plot.
No, yeah, it's not good. It's just like a not good version of Entourage is how I would describe it. Then he was in Black Klansman, which I haven't seen. Don't really know what else he's done, but I like him a lot. I liked him on Ballers despite not enjoying that show, and I'm excited to see him maybe take a little bit of a bigger star turn here.
Yeah, and that would bring me to my next piece of news with Robert Pattinson kind of having a banner, 4 to 5 years here. He's like in everything now. So he's going to play the Batman. And as we mentioned before with Colin Farrell, he's in this one as, I believe, the Penguin. Completely indistinguishable. And this looks really fun. I think they dropped the trailer. I don't think they expected quite the excitement that they received. I think it was at not a Comic-Con, but one of those fan conferences, and it was excellent from the trailer. So hopefully it lives up to the hype.
Yeah, trailer looks good. I mean, obviously there's going to be people out in force saying trailers always look good, which is true to a certain extent. But yeah, I really liked what I saw. I think going for the darker tone, I like that to a certain extent. I think with some of my Batman fandom, like I rewatched the 1989 one, which we discussed. There's a good amount of humor in that, and it also still manages to be serious. As with the Nolan movies, we talked about him taking himself a little too seriously. I think there's some tongue-in-cheek stuff in those as well. So I think as long as Pattinson doesn't fully lean into the edgelord like emo thing that he's going for in the trailer, there's a little bit of a lighter side to him in the movie, then I'm pretty much all the way in. I think I don't necessarily. I don't love the idea of him just being this kind of shut in. Like there needs to be some charisma, some humor to, Bruce Wayne for the picture to fully be painted. But like I said, cautiously excited right now.
Yeah, I think of all the Batman iterations, I think it reminds me most of the TV show Gotham. I don't know if you've seen that, but
yeah, I've seen a couple episodes.
Yeah, just the whole dark, like thematic milieu. There's my vocab word of the day. It just reminded me. Yeah, that's right. I had to slip that in there. Just reminded me of that. I think they're really playing up the whole Arkham Asylum angle, especially with the popularity of the Joker. So looking forward to this one. I'm really not a big superhero guy. Like I'm not like a big Avengers guy. I'm not gonna like go out the day it comes out.
Me neither.
But I do like, I do like DC stuff. So
I just like Batman. Like I don't know, man. I wasn't really into the Avengers. I'm sure I'll watch the Avengers at some point and I'll like them. But I just it's a little too much for me sometimes. Like all the franchising stuff, I don't necessarily love what that's doing for movies. Though if people want to enjoy them, that's totally fine. But yeah, I don't know. Like I like Batman because of Nolan, pretty much.
My thing is like if you want to see humor in Batman, go to the Funny or Die videos, and that'll have you rolling for a good half hour, I would say.
Okay.
You've never seen them?
No, I think. Wait, so what's the premise?
It's basically what's his name? Pete Holmes, that comedian. He plays Batman. He does the whole like over exaggerated Batman voice, and he's like very confused. Like he doesn't know the difference between Harvey Dent and Two-Face. It's pretty funny.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I actually did hear about this. I heard Pete Holmes doing some sort of Batman thing. I think recently in relation to this trailer. So maybe I'll check those out.
All right. Well, how about that? And two other pieces of news I had. One is Olivia Wilde is actually tasked with directing a Spider-Woman movie, which it's kind of a unique choice. I don't think of her at all in that role, but it's good to see some female directors, getting their shot.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is the woman that was on like House a decade ago, right?
She's married to Jason Sudeikis, I believe. Let me look her up here.
Yeah, I know she's an actress. I've seen her in some stuff. I didn't really know she was in the directing game.
Yeah, she was in House. Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, I mean, only 36. Been an actress her whole life, but I'm looking forward to it. See what she has.
Jon Favreau jumped into the picture and went from being an actor to one of the better directors of probably this century. So,
can be done. And then final piece of news, just to wrap up the whole Chris Nolan thing. During the shooting of Tenet, he actually crashed a full-size 747 airplane. This dude is so morally against doing anything CGI or digital that he's willing to go to these lengths. I gotta say, I respect the move, but
yeah, I mean, God bless him. Like he's just so committed to shooting on film, having theaters still remain open despite the pandemic going on. He's doing all these practical effects. I like Chris, man. I dig what he's bringing, and I love this anecdote. You presented it pretty much right before we started recording, and it's about as Nolan as it gets. I'm pretty sure a lot of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not really news at all. It's just like, what the hell are we doing? But
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if you told me that in Inception they like turned a city like upside down on itself to like actually create, and they spent all the money on it to make that happen. Like that's just kind of who he is. And I think you can see this part in the trailer. I think this was like the first main trailer for the movie. You can see this happening. So he went balls to the wall, and he wanted the world to know about it. So makes me even more excited for Tenet.
Yeah, I can see like the documentary being put out. Like Vienna still hasn't recovered from being turned 90 degrees sideways. Yeah, everyone's like leaving their homes and stuff. I could see it. It wouldn't shock me.
And no one's like wearing glasses or something, like sitting there talking about how he feels so bad for the people, but it just kind of had to be done for the art of the movie.
It's for the art. It's for the arts. So yeah, I believe that's all we have regarding movies that we've seen last week and our update on the news. We do have Fargo season 2. Mm-hmm. We did season 1 2 weeks ago, and Jake basically hyped it up to me as one of the best, seasons of television ever. And I don't disagree. I think I will say this. I think I enjoyed season 1 more, but I think season 2 was the better season, if that makes sense.
I think that's fair. It kind of like Noah Hawley, who's the creator of the show, said that like they kind of go for something different every single year. And like for some people, season 1 is going to be like your movie. He refers to them as movies, basically, just like 10-hour movies. he's like, yeah, season 1, that's kind of my movie. Season 2, not really my thing. Like season 2 is all the way my thing. I love the idea of it basically just being like this gang war. The themes of like, corporate America sort of taking over the, smaller mom and pop type operations and stuff like that. That's consistent both in the gang war and then sort of the politics of it with like the Reagan administration coming to the fold and all the positives and negatives that brought, and the end of Carter, and like this sort of really unexplored, like very tumultuous and weird era that was like the late 1970s that you really don't see in fiction a whole lot. But like after watching this, I was like, damn, I'm pretty fascinated by this.
Yeah, definitely, like you said, a tumultuous part of America's history. A lot of people want to forget, coming off Watergate. Then you have, the whole Jimmy Carter thing, the hostage situation in Iran. Just a very complicated time, like gas shortages. It's just a very complicated time. I think this season really captures that for the audience. I was thoroughly impressed. I think I was doing a little bit of research on it, and what I found is like it's basically based on the Book of Job from the Bible. And I was really thrown off by the whole UFO situation, but from what I read, they said that is supposed to mean the eye of God, basically looking down upon the people.
Yeah, just kind of like a force majeure type thing. It's a reference to, I mean, these seasons, I should say, are just rife with references to Coen movies. And that was actually the UFO thing. People kind of really took it or left it. I personally loved it. I thought it was kind of a weird flourish that like they sort of flirt with the fantastic in Fargo. They don't go all the way in on it. In season 1, it was sort of the fish falling from the sky as a sort of biblical act. And that's kind of what it's supposed to be in this one. And it's explicitly a reference to, I think, a late 90s movie the Coens did called The Man Who Wasn't There.
I've not seen that.
Yeah, really weird movie shot in black and white. It's got Billy Bob in it as sort of like depressed, like just misanthropic, like barber. James Gandolfini's actually in it. He does a really good job. And it kind of, without giving too much away, that has a UFO in it that sort of plays a small role that you don't fully understand. So it's kind of the same idea. And it's something that goes pretty much unexplained, which, like we've talked about, we both kind of appreciate the ambiguous stuff within our entertainment. This is something that is very much present in season 2 with both the UFO and I think with the villain turn of Hansi near the end, which is a character who's really, really badass. And like he's both a villain and somebody that you really sympathize with at the same time, which I think is great. And I think Patrick Wilson does a great job as Lou, who's kind of the main character at the center of it all. Ted Danson is kind of the older version of him, who I was thoroughly impressed by as somebody I hadn't really seen in a serious acting performance. I think he did great. And writing overall, I think just all throughout, it's great. And then I texted you, I think like the last 2 hours of it are some of the craziest 2 hours of TV I've ever seen. I think episode 9 is in particular my favorite episode of TV ever. Episode 9
is definitely up there. I think I would put a few, a couple Game of Thrones episodes up there, but it's definitely in the conversation. And I actually thought the best performance out of the entire season, out of the entire cast, was Kirsten Dunst, who plays the craziest person. She sees the UFO and she's like, "Oh, honey, that's just a flying saucer. No worries.
Come on."
Her
and Jesse Plemons are hilarious together.
And they're actually engaged, which I just found out.
Yeah, I think that's where they met.
Yep. And I just think overall, like I said, I enjoyed season 1 more, but I don't think any episode in this season skipped a beat. I think everyone was really strong. From what I read, some people had some issues with episode 10. I didn't really see that. It wasn't necessarily as action-packed at the very end, but I enjoyed it. And I just think overall the production value, the cinematography, and the whole split screen thing really did it for me.
That's really what stands out as the thing that I think separates it visually. I think Hawley said that it was something that they tried to do in reference to like TV shows from the 1970s. And that was something they weren't even planning on doing at first. They just kind of discovered it in the editing room, which I think is kind of a cool story. And part of what makes TV so cool is this like sort of living, breathing thing, as opposed to a movie, which is a very kind of planned out, like, we go and shoot here for 6 weeks and that's kind of it. You can tell there was a lot of flourishes that they sort of just discovered on the fly, and they all somehow work together so perfectly in this. And like I said, one of my absolute favorite seasons of TV ever. And there is going to be a tie-in with season 4 because it's season 4 is basically about how the whole Kansas City mafia develops, and Chris Rock is sort of at the helm of one of the sides of that gang war as it is. So that's pretty much why I'm so excited for season 4, because I love this so much. And I feel like that is kind of going to be the prequel to that, like this kind of was for the first season.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the tying in the first season to the second season, the whole Solverson family, and you can tell Lou is kind of a straight-laced guy in season 2, and not that he isn't in season 1, but I think he's a little bit more, I guess I should say, humbled, because he's seen so much in his career. He literally saw a UFO. It seems like he's definitely gone through somewhat of a character arc. And, that was nice to see how they kind of tied that in.
Yeah, I think Fargo is going back to the movie even is something that has sort of a very female kind of feminist identity with female leading characters, which I think is great. Obviously with Marge, who's one of my favorite movie characters ever. Molly is a great character in season 1. That continues into season 3, which you'll see. But yeah, I think Lou kind of is the male embodiment of that. So I find him pretty relatable, pretty intriguing, and I think kind of bringing that male presence to the front of the scene for Fargo was an interesting choice, and it worked out pretty well because, like you mentioned, just plays a very straight-laced Patrick Wilson. Like, Kirsten Dunst is like sitting in the back, like crying about how like she's so oppressed, and he's just like, you know what, people are dead. Like, shut up. Like that kind of encapsulates his whole character, better or worse. And I loved it. Thoughts
on the Mike Milligan character?
One of my favorite characters in all of TV. That's another thing that I just didn't hit on. Like, I think he's kind of, what I find so interesting about that character and that story arc is he's initially presented to be this kind of sociopathic guy that's just follows orders, does what he has to do, gets shit done. And then it starts to unravel for him a little bit. He loses one of his kitchen brother's assistants who gets killed in a battle out in the woods. And he's kind of like, he sort of gets lost a little bit. And he's sort of proven to not be this effective sort of just, operator that he appears to be at first. Then he kind of, through an act of God, basically with Hansi and the UFO and everything, he's sort of able to save it, goes back to his bosses, and then he got what he wanted, which was a promotion. And he's just sort of left sitting at a desk with a typewriter in front of him, wondering what the hell happened. I think it's just an interesting sort of take on he gets a lot of comparisons, I think, to the Billy Bob character from season 1. And I think it's sort of the take on it is that like that's kind of what he wanted to be, but then things don't really go the way that he planned, even in the success that he wound up having. I think it was an interesting story arc and a great performance by Bokeem Woodbine, I think is the actor's name. Love Mike Milligan.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think Billy Bob characters of Lorne Malvo, I think that's the best character from what I've seen so far. I haven't seen season 3. But yeah, really enjoyed that character. There was one point in one of the earlier episodes of season 2 where it literally looked like a shot-for-shot remake of a Breaking Bad like episode. With Mike Milligan standing there with the twins on either end, and then I guess it was the patriarch of the Gerhardt family there in the wheelchair. I'm like, this is like character for character Breaking Bad, but I digress. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a good point. When it's kind of like him talking to the Tuco's grandfather or whatever it was, and then he's talking to Otto, I think his name was. Yeah, but continue.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, just that was kind of a funny observation on my part. I think this is a season that I'm gonna go and rewatch at some point. Definitely missed a lot because there are so many intricacies, and with the warring factions of the families. There's a lot that I probably didn't pick up on, but yeah, I think I really enjoyed this season. And I would tend to agree. I think it's one of the best seasons of all time of television.
Yeah, as opposed to season 1, which is a little more kind of straight-laced, maybe 2 or 3 storylines. This is kind of like 4 or 5 all operating at once. Like we mentioned, it surrounds a gang war as opposed to just one sort of crime that takes place. It's several crimes all laced into this one big narrative. So definitely rewards a rewatch. I think I've rewatched it a few times since I first saw it back in 2017 or so. And I rewatched the first couple episodes here for preparation for this. So, nice. I mean, I never get tired of it.
Yeah. And that whole scene in the motel parking lot there, I think it was in episode 9 with war pigs playing in the background. Totally badass. Love that part.
It's incredible. You mentioned how the 10th episode is kind of like an epilogue of sorts. It's kind of true, but like that whole that whole sequence where like War Pigs is opening and they're doing the split screen thing. It's just like pure chaos. Hansi's like running out to get after Peggy, and the Jesse Plemons character's name is escaping me. And that's basically just No Country for like minutes when they're just going through that's a shot for shot remake of No Country for Old Men, basically, where they're just going through like the empty town and like the cars, and they're like ducking behind cars and like shooting at each other. It's I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. Have you seen the TV show Barry?
Yeah, I saw most of the first season and I fell off, but I want to go back to that. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Reminded me of a few scenes there from season 2.
Okay.
So I'm sure they, I'm sure TV shows and movies, they share a little bit, they take from, which is totally fine. That's the art form, but just see some similarities in some of these crime dramas.
Yeah, definitely. It wouldn't surprise me. I think this is kind of a favorite of critics and of other people within the industry. And like I said, I don't care like how many people are watching it or not watching it. It seems like most people seem to agree that it's pretty critically acclaimed. So glad to see it returning, and glad to be returning to it with you here with season 2.
Yep. So that was season 2. We did season 1 2 episodes back, and we will be doing season 3 in the coming weeks, probably 2 weeks from now, but definitely before season 4 debuts. Don't know if I'll be watching that live on FX. I might, but if it's on Hulu the next day, I might also tune in there.
I think I may do the same thing. It depends on how many people are on my Twitter feed talking about it, because I don't want to have it spoiled necessarily. But I do prefer my experience, especially with a show like this, to be pretty much commercial free. So I'm probably going to hopefully wait for the Hulu release the next day.
So Jake, are you ready to advance to our movie review?
I certainly am. We are talking Oh Brother, Where Art Thou from 2000, look at that, Coen Brothers picture.
Look at that, tying in the Coen Brothers. Initial thoughts on this, I think I ranked it on my list at a 7.9. I think your score was extremely close to mine. I think, like I said, with Uncut Gems, I think this would be one movie that I might go back and rank a few spots higher at least, but very fun movie.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think fun is a great way to describe it. Very intriguing, cool casting choices at the top there with guys like George Clooney and John Turturro, who I would not expect to be playing these hard scrabble like Mississippi guys that are these prison camps and all this stuff. And I don't know, I think they all played off very well, so I enjoyed the performances a lot. I think one of the things I wrote down was I knew this was a Coen movie. Didn't really look into it deeper beyond that. I kind of knew who the stars were already, but as soon as I saw the first shot, I knew Deakins was the cinematographer, which you always love to see that. I'm always very impressed by him. He's worked with the Coens plenty of times, Fargo and other stuff. Love Deakins, so he was, obviously did a very good job with this. What else? The music obviously stands out. We're going to be talking about that, but that's probably the main thing for me from this movie was I really enjoyed the music. Just very much fit the era, and also manages to kind of, I think each song has a different identity, and you kind of remember songs a lot more than you would with a movie that's set in an era of music that you wouldn't really recognize a ton of, if that makes sense. Like it all kind of manages to be unique to each other, and so that was pretty memorable and pretty good. And I just love the idea of this. Like a fun slapsticky sort of comedy crime drama set in an era that I'm very fascinated by. I don't know if it's technically Prohibition, but it's the late 30s, I think. So it's kind of just moving out of Prohibition. I think it might still be the law in where they are in Mississippi. So I love that era and that whole aesthetic. So just a very fun movie visually. Loved the music from it, and I love the performances. Gave it an 8 out of 10, I believe. So it was very, very enjoyable to watch for me on Sunday night.
Yeah, pretty solid score there. You touched on Roger Deakins and the cinematography. This is actually the first live action feature film whose color palette was manipulated digitally. So if you look at the original live shots, the part, I guess, in Mississippi where they shot or wherever they shot, it was extremely green. So they really wanted that color palette of the brown, the dark hue. You get that a lot with some of the older movies. If you've ever seen 42, which is basically a biopic of Jackie Robinson, also has a very similar kind of color palette, I guess I should say.
It makes sense in what they're going for, kind of depression, like hard scrabble, dust bowl type aesthetic, as opposed to like the sort of green lush thing, which I think they initially set out to have it looking green, but then they got down there and they're like, well, I think with what we're going for, it's going to make sense sort of with a sepia type tone. And that's what they went for. I was going to bring that up as well. One of the first movies to do the recoloring thing. And I think it works kind of perfectly.
Yeah. So those muted colors really sets the scene, really sets the, gives the viewer an idea of the era. I just really love this one. It's an adaptation of The Odyssey, which is kind of, a very Coen brothers thing to do. There's definitely very similar characters. Everett's character is similar to Odysseus. John Goodman's character is meant to signify the Cyclops. So it's just kind of one of those deep cuts that you see it for the first time. You really enjoy the music, you enjoy the dialogue. But when you get to know more about the movie, you want to rewatch it.
Yeah, and that's not even something that you would necessarily have to know to enjoy it, which I think is what's really, really cool about it. And yeah, like you mentioned the Goodman character. I didn't know that was supposed to be the Cyclops, but I knew about the Sirens, which is another big thing in the movie. And as soon as I laid eyes on those characters, I knew that that's what it was supposed to be. So it's kind of one of those cool, like, connective threads that, like I mentioned, you don't necessarily have to know, but if you do, it sort of colors the movie, gives you a better idea of what you're watching. But yeah, like I would compare this mainly to, I mentioned that my first movie on my list that I've started is True Grit from 2010, which is the Coen's adaptation of the book that was originally a movie starring John Wayne from the 60s or 50s, maybe, or maybe 60s. And yeah, like that movie, a lot of people like it as a classic, but the Coens in particular said they didn't like it. They didn't think it was a good adaptation of the book at all. And so they just went and they made a better version of it with Jeff Bridges in 2010. So that's mainly what I would compare this to. They basically just took a story that is already well established. They put it in, modern setting, modern technology that they could use to spruce it up and put their own spin on it. And they did a tremendous job.
Yeah. And we'll talk about trivia in a minute here, but neither of the Coen brothers had actually read The Odyssey, even though they were adapting it for a screenplay. They had just read the abridged comic book version, as I understand it. So just kind of one of those. Yeah, they're just like, screw it. We'll just slap that title in there and hope for the best. But yeah, I think this is one of their top. I probably put it in my top 5. Maybe it gets edged out there at number 5, but probably my top 5 Coen Brothers movies.
I would have to make that list. I think Fargo, Miller's Crossing, No Country, True Grit. Yeah, maybe that's in the 5th. I probably need to see more of their stuff. I know you've seen some of their earlier ones, so maybe I'll go back and check those out. But yeah, it's definitely up there. It doesn't really do a ton more than you would expect. It kind of just, like I said, they just had something it wanted to do. They set out and they did it. And yeah, it gets a B rating for me for that reason. Kind of similar in, the way that True Grit, they kind of just set out to do something. They did it. There wasn't really a whole lot of stuff to it. It's just a very workman-like production, and it's done in a very good way. But this also does kind of have its own flourish, like we're going to talk about with the music. Yeah, it's very artsy, kind of slapsticky. You sort of get that sense with the way that it starts. You immediately know what the tone is going to be when they open on the prisoners, chopping the rocks or whatever they're doing. I totally crushed that description, but yeah, the prisoners, kind of the drab gray jumpsuits that they're wearing, and then they just kind of emerge out of the leaves or whatever, and they're kind of running away all chained together, and it's kind of just a sort of a funny look at what they got going on. Then they make their way to the train, they jump on, and they see the guys on the train, and Clooney's character is kind of talking to him, trying to smooth talk him a little bit, and the Tim Blake Nelson's character, I think, can't get his way on, so he pulls him back, and they all fly out, and it's kind of just a very physical comedy, slapsticky type of thing that they're going for, which it's a delight to watch in 2020. You really don't see movies made like that anymore. Yeah,
you mentioned Tim Blake Nelson. He is one of my favorite actors of all time. He's kind of always kind of that bit character, kind of the you never the leading man. And the Coen brothers wrote the Delmar character for him, and they really wanted him in the movie, even though he was relatively unknown at the time. Steven Spielberg saw him in this movie and then put him in Minority Report. So,
So
that
what
kind
else
of
is he in other than that? Because I only knew him, and this took me a minute, but I only knew him as Looking Glass from Watchmen, which came out last year.
Yeah.
So it's been 20 years at this point.
he was I forget his character's name, but he was in Holes.
Okay, I haven't seen that since I was a kid.
Yep, he was in that. He was like one of the guards or whatever, and he was in Just Mercy, which just came out a year or two ago with Jamie Foxx, Michael B. Jordan. He was in that one as well. So that's probably the 4 or 5 movies that I've seen him in. But talented guy. You know, he's from Oklahoma, so he kind of gets the whole Southern drawl, the way of performing your dialogue. And another piece with that too is George Clooney relied on his accent from his uncle, who's from Kentucky.
Yeah, he's the guy who just immediately fits on screen. Like, having seen him as Looking Glass, he's kind of very much in that same and Watchmen was set in Oklahoma, so it kind of makes sense from that respect. But he's sort of kind of this straight-laced, deadpan, like Midwestern, Southern, whatever you want to call Oklahoma. But it translates well over to the Mississippi setting, and he just kind of blends in perfectly, as opposed to suave Clooney, who's doing like Soderbergh movies, and he's kind of like Mr. Cool Guy. He had been on ER. He's like Pretty Boy. Turturro is this kind of like hardcore, like Brooklyn guy. He's in like Rounders and some other stuff. And he's kind of like, he's got the New York accent. He's just a very New York actor. So kind of like Tim Blake Nelson is great in this, and he does sort of, like I said, he blends the most into the character at first. The other guys do a good job of blending into it, though. As the movie goes on, I think Turturro's the way he uses his voice is pretty hilarious, and then Clooney's character just totally leans into the fact that Clooney is playing the character. Like, he's he's a Dapper Dan man. He's all about his hair and like everything like that. I thought that was a very interesting, fun choice by the Coens, and I think a very self-conscious and self-deprecating performance there by Clooney, which is great to see.
Yes, I would tend to agree with that. Kind of funny that Ocean's 11 is the year after this movie. He's kind of playing this weird eccentric character, and then he goes to like the lead role of probably the best cast ever in a movie. So just kind of funny how his rise came. He was in Dust to Dawn, which is Robert Rodriguez's movie. He was in Out
of Sight a couple years before this, which is basically just like the pre-version of Oceans. It's Soderbergh directed. It's got him starring in it. I think J-Lo is starring in it as well. Yeah, that's a really fun movie. Check out Out of Sight if you haven't. I think it's from '97. Sort of a heist prison break type movie starring him and J-Lo. That's a cool one. And so that's 3 years before this, and then 4 years before Ocean. So a really interesting time in Clooney's life. I think it's kind of right around the time that he's becoming super, super famous, most beautiful man in the world type thing. But I think this is kind of one of those performances where you catch him just before that. And he's also sort of able to lean into the male beautiful thing in this movie as well. It's an interesting performance, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, but I will say I think he tends to play the same type character in Coen Brothers movies, because he is in Burn After Reading, and he plays a very similar type character, without the Southern accent. He's kind of like that eccentric, kind of oddball. So I don't know if that's kind of like his thing with them or what the case is, but he seems to morph into a different person when he's with the Coens.
Yeah, I mean, that's it makes sense. Like they definitely do a good job of taking guys that are sort of the good looking, like leading man type, and turning them into something else. Like Damon does it in True Grit as Beef, who's like the Texas like Ranger guy or whatever. Who else? They've done it several times throughout their career. I think Josh Brolin sort of kind of dirties himself up a little bit for No Country. So they definitely do a good job of that. And it's maybe the most present I've ever seen in this one, which is a very neurotic, sort of strange performance by Clooney. They got a lot of good stuff out of him for this.
Are you ready to move on to some trivia?
I sure am.
Okay. Let's see here. So pull this up. So this movie was originally inspired by The Wizard of Oz and not The Odyssey. So basically, three saps on the run. The whole concept there. Kind of interesting if that would have been an adaptation / remake, if it would have been The Wizard of Oz.
It feels like the Coens are like a couple years away from doing like a serious hardcore Wizard of Oz remake for like HBO Now or whatever. Like this gritty thing about how like the the fucking Tin Man is freezing up, and they're like they there's some Jewish like allegory about how he like
just give me
greases like fucking elbows. Or, I don't know. I'm going off the rails.
Just give me Jeff Bridges as the Cowardly Lion, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I don't have a brain. I don't have yellow brick road there with them boys.
I'm the feline, man.
God. I actually watched half of that too. Now that I think about it, I was down at the beach with friends, and yeah, they flicked it on. Like I mentioned, I was not a fan of it on my first watch. I started watching it with some friends, and everyone was kind of laughing. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely enjoying this a little more. Need to finish it though.
I love The Big Lebowski. I'm unapologetic about it. I know it's kind of the popular choice for people who haven't seen the Coen Brothers. They say, "Oh, that's my favorite Coen Brothers movie." I think it is sort of a Pulp Fiction knockoff, but I am a big fan of The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, it's. I gotta return to it because I was definitely enjoying it on my rewatch, but I fell asleep because it was like way too late at night.
Yeah. Let's see what else I have for trivia. Tim Blake Nelson burning the candle at both ends. He during the shoot of Oh Brother Where Art Thou, he was also editing Othello at night. So he would act during the day and edit at night. So good on you, Tim Blake Nelson.
I'm trying to remember how or why, but I think Othello is like a part of Looking Glass's character, which would be kind of a cool little inclusion there by who was it that did Watchmen? That doesn't matter. Continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then another piece of trivia for you. This would have been a really interesting casting choice. Right, I guess not off the heels, but right before Spider-Man. J.K. Simmons was actually offered one of the parts and turned it down.
Do we know which one?
Let's see what it says here. Nope. It just says he auditioned for multiple parts, backed out when one of the characters the Coens were leaning toward casting him was too similar to Vernon Schillinger, his racist character from HBO show Oz.
Get your fucking head in that river and back yourself right now, Elmer Fudd.
Bring me Spider-Man.
Oh God, I love J.K. He would have crushed it in this. I don't care what he did.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like what character would have been perfect for him. But
it might have been the Stephen Root character, the guy who plays Milton, who's the record producer that puts them on as the Soggy Bottom Boys. He would have been funny doing that, kind of just like ripping them to shreds as they're like recording their music.
Yeah, that would have been that definitely would have been an all-timer. It would have been interesting to see his career trajectory after that. But see what else we got here. Yeah, I was actually going to bring this up in music, but I'll just bring it up now. Tim Blake Nelson, who played Delmer, and Chris Thomas King were the only two actors in the entire film to actually sing their parts. And Chris Thomas King plays Tommy Johnson, their fourth member of the Soggy Bottom Boys.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. I could see those guys being the artsy ones, and then Turturro and Clooney are just like kind of punting on that. They're just like, yeah, let's go to craft services and like, just hit on the wing and fill out.
Nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I think the music. That's my last. One more piece of trivia. Tommy Johnson. So I actually thought this both rewatches until I just read this. Tommy Johnson is not based off Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson's basically the godfather of blues music, and literally has a documentary on Netflix called "I Sold My Soul to the Devil at the Crossroads." So it's very similar. Apparently, they're not the same person, but I kind of thought that was a ripoff. But
yeah, it might very well be. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, especially there's such like a niche story that they're doing here.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that guy's performance. I think he played it pretty low key, and it's a very serious topic they're discussing with a character like that a lot of the time. And I just also love that sort of Depression, Prohibition era mythology of like music and sort of like selling your soul to the devil. I just think it's kind of a cool and artistic choice that I really enjoy.
So before we move on to categories, thoughts on the George Nelson subplot?
Remind me.
So George Nelson's the guy, like the guy from, I guess, New York or whatever, drops it.
Babyface, the bank robber.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, okay. That was okay. So I enjoyed the acting performance. I think that's the guy who plays Jimmy Altieri on The Sopranos. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's him. Yeah, I enjoyed the acting performance. I don't know if I necessarily needed that part in the storyline, and this is maybe one of my criticisms is I felt that a movie that's kind of this niche and this sort of, weird, for lack of a better word, I just feel like it didn't need to be as long as it was, and this is maybe one of the storylines I could have done without. But I do love the idea of like Prohibition, Depression era bank robbers. That's actually one of my favorite Elmore Leonard books. It's called The Hot Kid. It's all about that, which was inspired kind of by John Dillinger and that whole idea. So I think that's sort of where this takes its inspiration from. And I'm sure it's like a thread from the Odyssey or whatever. So
it is.
That's fine. Yeah, like that. It was fine. I didn't need him to be in as many scenes as he was in. But yeah, the actor did a good job. And while it was one of the things I could have done without storyline wise, it being in there, I don't think it hurt the story at all, but it felt a little extraneous.
Like, I didn't know whether to like laugh or gasp when I saw the cow take the Tommy gun to the torso. I know it's not really like a true Coen Brothers movie without like some form of gratuitous violence or some weirdness, but that was, it was kind of strange.
Yeah, it just sort of felt a little bit out of place at times, and I don't know. It just didn't feel like that those would be guys that would be rolling with a dude like that, and they just kind of willingly just run into a bank with him that he's going to like rob, and they're just sort of accomplice and accessory to it, and that's just like totally fine. It's like, I don't know, like that's sort of not the vibe that I got. I sort of more read their characters as guys that were sort of being taken advantage of by the prison system or whatever. They were just serving out their times for stuff that was a little more non-violent and non-sociopathic. But when it kind of struck a weird chord with me is how I would summarize it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that's you see that in many Coen Brothers movies. Just one small piece, scene, or character that doesn't really fit necessarily. It added a different element, not always focusing on the Southern culture. So it's just kind of it is kind of out of place to see like a New Yorker kind of just going around the South robbing banks, but teach their own, I guess.
Yeah, and I think Babyface is like a real figure from Prohibition era bank robbers. So I don't know if this character was directly supposed to be that guy or just kind of based on that guy. But yeah, it seems like they definitely directly took inspiration from like a real figure, and they just kind of decided to shoehorn it into that whole thing. And it was just kind of weird, I thought, with it being in there. And then like, obviously the siren scene was great, but then like that kind of leads to Turturro being cut out of like essentially half of the movie, or at least like a big section of it. And I thought that was kind of strange. So I felt like maybe a little more Turturro, a little bit less George Babyface Nelson would be my summation of that. I crushed that.
Yeah, so I think this segues pretty well to our category, our first category, throwing tomatoes. So basically any scenes, any characters, any plot lines that we don't really, they don't sit well with us, or we don't agree with them. We think they could have been, the movie could have been done without. For me, just a nitpick for me, like they were obviously running away in the field. They were basically along the side of the road, and then they were in the movie theater, and they were never once spotted by the prison guards.
And they're on the truck that literally goes through the same like spot that they were in, like breaking the rocks up, and they just kind of they cover their faces or like don't even attempt to. Yeah, I think that kind of goes in with the theme of the movie though, so I'd hit back against that a little bit. Just the fact that it's kind of slapsticky, like there's sort of there's a little bit of a wink and a nudge aspect to it. So I was pretty much fine with that. Yeah, my complaints pretty much just boiled down to what we already talked to. Just a little bit long. I feel like for an artsy kind of kitschy movie like this, it just didn't need to be as long as it was. It kind of gives me vibes of a movie that could be like 115, 100, or no, I did that wrong. Like 90 minutes.
Let's say it's longer than it
no, 80, 90-minute movie type thing. Like a movie like Reservoir Dogs, for example. Like it's a little bit of a weird comparison, but that's like an art movie from the early 90s that I feel like it's just a perfect length. There's nothing extraneous. Like maybe something a little more like that, where you just kind of have what you want to do. You go out, you set out to do it. Also, it was the story, like we mentioned, the George Nelson storyline was a little bit weird. Some of the stuff they were doing, it just, I don't know if it was threaded together 100%, like in a way that made it easy to follow. So I think that's partially the Coens just kind of being deliberately obscure, which they sometimes are. are, which is fine. It's just sort of what they do. But I think that combined with the fact that the characters are sometimes hard to understand, like dialogue wise, it kind of made it hard to follow. But that, it wasn't all bad. So it's just kind of a minor gripe, but that would be sort of my main complaint with it.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think, this kind of goes into our rankings. This is in the 7s for me, which is probably unfair, but I think there are definitely some plot holes, some problems to be had. And like you mentioned with Reservoir Dogs, there is something, to be appreciated about the whole get in, get out. There's no extraneous, bullshit in the movie. So I definitely would agree with that. So the next category we have is That's a Bravo. Total and complete opposite of Throwing Tomatoes. Things we loved about the movie. I have two things, but first and foremost, I would definitely say the Roger Deakins cinematography.
Yeah, that's visually, that's what stands out to me is the way that he shot it, the way he had it photographed and everything, and the way that he kind of came back and did the recolorization. I think it all worked exceptionally well, and it just kind of set it up for as soon as you see that first shot, you kind of know what the tone is going to be.
Yep, agreed. And then number 2, I would say it's like a mystic, spiritual type theme to the movie. Obviously, you have the blind man, who's basically the prophet or the soothsayer, going on the railroad by himself. He says you're going to find a fortune. It's not necessarily the fortune that you seek, but you will attain it. You're going to see a cow on the roof of a house. They see that at the very end after the flood. So I like that whole mystic kind of thing to it. And obviously when they go in the river with the religious community and they get baptized or they get saved, and then Everett is the only one who does not go into the river. But obviously with the flood at the end, he's the first one to poke his head out of the water, hence being baptized almost.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that, like we were talking about with Fargo, like the idea of like acts of God and like sort of the mystic elements to stories. I love that. And I especially love it when it's not really explicitly like explained or stated to you. It's just kind of like they're simmering underneath the surface, or there's elements of it. And it's definitely maybe a little bit more on the nose with this, but that's an element of it that I particularly enjoy, especially in a setting like this where America is pretty much in such dire straits coming out of the Depression. And this is sort of set in kind of an era, and especially in this location in the South where you kind of have this industrial revolution like hitting against this rural thing, and like there's a lot of uncertainty going on, and people are just kind of looking for salvation, looking for reasoning, looking for an explanation to all the shitty things that are happening to them, basically. And the character of Everett, I think, is a great example of that, where he's basically just trying to put on this kind of eminence front, to quote the Who, and try to like look like this really kind of cool, dapper guy that's got it all put together. But in reality, like his life's kind of falling apart. He's got like his wife has left him and is marrying another guy, and he's got these daughters that are basically forgetting about him, and he's pretty busted up about it, but he's trying not to show that. And he's basically trying to just put it out. He's basically just trying to run from any sort of spirituality or anything, because he kind of doesn't want to confront it. You can kind of tell that that's sort of what the main theme with him is. But when he finally does, and he's like baptized or whatever, and he's basically able to win back his wife, or whatever ultimately happened between them. I don't really understand what the intimation there was supposed to be. I think it's sort of the meeting of those ideas, and how they're summed up by the character of Everett. I was pretty particularly impressed by from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, I think it just like you said, I think it kind of takes a look at the culture of the region, extremely spiritual. Everett was kind of secular throughout the entire thing, and then obviously can't escape his fate at the end with the whole baptism thing. Quick note though, his wife was played by Holly Hunter, and I know with our movie review last week, White Men Can't Jump, she was actually one of the people that was going to play the girlfriend of what's his face, Billy. Yeah. Interesting little
connective thread there between White Men Can't Jump and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Nobody's what you're gonna get on our podcast.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting that nowhere else. But yeah, I kind of love that unexplained spirituality, mysticism. The Coens obviously not exactly like devout religious guys, but you can tell that they've got something going on. They definitely have some fascination by faith and by, things that are maybe going on beyond what we can understand. And they tend to include that in a lot of their movies. I think they do it better than a lot of other people, and they do it positively in some ways with a movie like this. They do it maybe a little more pessimistically in a movie like A Serious Man, which I still haven't seen yet, but I understand it's supposed to be kind of dark in that respect. But just explorations of that kind of stuff. And the fact that they don't really explicitly state it is what I enjoy. I like that kind of stuff a lot in a movie like this, or for example, a movie like Pulp Fiction even does that a little bit with like the bullets passing through them and the suitcase and everything like that. I think the ambiguity is what I really enjoy about the way that the story plays out.
Yeah, I think they're definitely into divine intervention or whatever form that takes. Obviously, they always introduce the idea of fate as a central piece of their plot. A movie that I really did not enjoy from them, but definitely hammers us home is The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Another Tim Blake Nelson. He's also in that. I think they have the same type theme, the same type motifs in a lot of their films. Anything else you wanted to add to That's a Bravo?
I mean, we're going to talk about the soundtrack obviously coming up next here, but that's really the main thing that stands out to me. It's something that does sort of hammer home the mysticism and spirituality of it. And I just love that era of music. It's not something that I necessarily sit around and listen to all the time, but when I do, I just find it very pleasing to the ear. And they made a lot of really great selections. And the idea of like religion and spirituality and music like this, I think I couldn't put my finger on it, but I've come to realize that I think it was a big influence on, I don't know if this is going to mean anything to you, but it's a big influence, I think, on BioShock Infinite, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Basically, it's set in a floating city in 1911, where you have this main character who's this kind of like washed up former Pinkerton who's like in his late 30s, and he had like this failed marriage and everything, and he's like an alcoholic, and he has to basically go to this floating city to like find this girl and bring them back to these people to wipe away all of his debt. And he kind of reminds me of the Everett character. And then when he goes to the city, basically it's run by these like white evangelicals and like kind of Americana with a lot of really like dark stuff brooding under the surface, racism and everything. And it's got a lot of like sort of evangelical type of mystic religious music in that. So I think that was a video game that I think was very clearly inspired by this movie. So watching it, and with that being one of my favorite games of all time, I was happy to make that connection. I think just another kind of cool piece of this movie that connects to another piece of pop culture that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think you can probably tell by now. My first two picks for movie reviews for this podcast have been Hell or High Water and Oh Brother, Where Art? I screwed that up. Where Art Thou? I'm just kind of, I'm just attracted to that whole like forgotten era, that whole forgotten like culture community. So I do appreciate when people like the Coen brothers, Taylor Sheridan, Quentin Tarantino kind of bring it back into the mainstream.
Yeah, I think it's done really well in this, and there's probably no better setting to kind of go to for something like that than like the late 30s, which I think is why it all kind of come together in such an impressive way.
And our next category, keeping score, definitely very prominent for this film, a film that is known as having probably one of the best soundtracks of any film ever. So keeping score, basically, we're taking a look at the score or the soundtrack or the music of the film. I just wrote everything. I think I can go song by song and tell you something about it. I really love Down to the River to Pray, which was actually written by a slave, and it contained code words. I don't know if you knew this, but it contained some code words basically to how to escape to the Underground Railroad.
Okay, I've definitely heard of like stories like that happening. I didn't know if that was something that was featured in this movie, but that's pretty cool.
Yep, and obviously "Man of Constant Sorrow" being the prominent song in this movie. Tim Blake Nelson has his own song. The song at the end with the flood. They just knocked it out of the park. T-Bone Burnett was tasked to score this movie. He also did The Big Lebowski, and he used to be the guitarist for Bob Dylan in the 1970s.
He won a Grammy for this album, like this soundtrack as an album in 2001, which tells you how really well thought of this the soundtrack is. You mentioned Man of Constant Sorrow, tying it back to Fargo season 2. That is
Yes.
as is All Fly Away. I'll point that out, the song that the Sirens are singing. That's also in Fargo season 2, so a little bit more connective tissue there. And they did a really good job. Those actresses as the Sirens singing that song. I think it was a really entrancing performance, to throw a little pun out there.
There you go. They actually enlisted the help of Alison Krauss to sing on the soundtrack. I know I've looked at some live performances of Man of Constant Sorrow. That's like a huge hit among that genre of music. Dan Siminski, I believe his name is, or Timinski, performed that song, and he still does to this day with his band live. So obviously got him a lot of credibility in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have to sit down and listen to this actively. I saw you tweeting out the soundtrack, but other than watching the movie, I haven't really looked into it. So I'm definitely going to sit down and actively go through it. I'm a big soundtrack guy, and this is a one that's going to be joining the top of the short list for me. Yeah,
I've probably listened to the Whiplash soundtrack like 3 or 4 times over. So this one is definitely up there. Some of my favorites. But
a couple Tarantinos are on my list there, so I probably got to start expanding my repertoire a little bit.
Yeah, Spotify has a Tarantino playlist.
Okay.
Of I think there's like 70 odd songs on there, and my favorite nerdy thing to do is to listen to the song and actually match it to the movie that it goes to. Doesn't always work out. I know Apple Blossom from Jack White in The Hateful Eight. Always forget about that one, but good stuff.
Interesting.
So our last category is quote and quotables. This is our favorite quotes from the movie. Pretty straightforward. Maybe not necessarily a movie that you think of when you think of like very quotable, but it did have some interesting lines of dialogue in there.
Yeah, a lot of really snappy stuff that you can kind of miss if you're not paying 100% attention, which I was trying to, but it was a Sunday night, so I was kind of a little checked out through parts of it. So I tried my best, but I did go into IMDb and find some of the ones that I did remember enjoying. First one was when they first meet Tommy at that crossroads. By the way, fucking incredible shot of the crossroads there. You can tell Deakins was kind of had his fingerprints all over that one.
Kind of reminded me of Castaway at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So they meet Tommy there at the crossroads, and he says, "I had to be up there at the crossroads last midnight to sell my soul to the devil." Everett says, "Well, ain't it a small world, spirituality speaking? Pete and Delmar just been baptized and saved. I guess I'm the only one that remains unaffiliated," which kind of sums up the Everett character and the spirituality theme pretty well. Yeah,
it really hammers it home. My first quote to share would be from Wash Hogwallop, hell of a name. Mrs. Hogwallop, done RUNNOFT. Which they use several times, and it's just kind of like
get the first time, so I'm glad they hammered it home.
Yeah, they said it about 2 or 3 times, so definitely seems to be like a Southern type thing to say with their dialects. So definitely a big fan of that line.
Yeah, particularly at the time, I think there was kind of a lot of running words together and not really focusing too much on grammar, because if you think about it, your characters that probably aren't getting too much education, especially in that front.
Yeah, very very valid point. Another quote here from me is by Homer Stokes during the entire KKK scene. The quote was,
the most sounding name of all time,
ever, just insanely on the nose there. The quote being, "These boys desecrated a burning cross," as if it wasn't already desecrated.
Yeah, I wrote that one down, and then I also wrote for him, "This band of miscreants this very evening interfered with a lynch mob in the performance of its duty." And I think those two, those are like two of some of the better satirical summations of like racism and how stupid it is that I think I've ever seen. Another thing the Coens are very good at is depicting shitheads for kind of what they are.
Yeah, I definitely can see Tarantino taking the scene and putting into Django Unchained for the KKK scene. Very similar.
Scenes, kind of making them just sort of out to be like not the smartest individuals in the world.
Right. Any other quotes from you?
A couple more from Everett. I just really like the whole thing with him and his hair. So I like the smell of
the pomade.
The pleasing odor is half the point when they're like talking about how the hair pomade just smells terrible. And you can just imagine like back then that it's just coming from some factory and it's just like all oily and stuff. It probably smells awful. And then just I'm a Dapper Dan, man. That's just sloganeering at its finest.
Love that. Love that. I think the Ever character really stands out to me with his dialogue. Obviously, he seems to be a learned man with some of the terms he comes up with.
He's got the gift of gab.
The gift of gab. Yeah, I sense it. You're a man like me. You got the gift of gab.
Exactly.
Another scene from him and a quote from him stood out to me was when they're escaping in the initial scene and they get up on the train and he says the word metallurgic, which didn't really know. I had to look that one up on the trusty Merriam-Webster, and it's the science of metals. So
yeah,
there you go.
I did know metallurgy. Shout out to the Sid Meier's Civilization games. Buddy. He also uses one that is not anything real, which is mixaphorically speaking. I forget the context, but that was somewhere on the IMDb quotes. I didn't write it down, but I enjoy that.
Yeah, you got to figure during his time in prison, he was getting pretty bored and maybe looked up a dictionary or two. And, some words get a little bit jumbled in there. It's possible.
Yeah, he's just like old Andy Dufresne there, just cracking the books. Good for him.
Another quote from me from the blind man in the initial railroad scene says, I work ... for no man. I have no name. And then he goes on to give them the entire prophecy there.
I like it. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had written down for quotes. You got any more?
I might have one more. Let me see my sheet here. One more from the burning of the cross scene. These boys are not white. These boys are not white. Hell, they ain't even old timey.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a good one. So one more note that I didn't touch on in trivia. The whole Pappy O'Daniel character is actually based off the actual Texas governor of that time, Pappy O'Daniel. And he actually enlisted a musical group called the Light Crust Doughboys. And they would perform on his radio show. So that entire piece was all accurate.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I did see that piece, actually. It's unfortunately not very shocking.
So, that was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I think, Jake, sounds like you enjoy yourself. Kind of a different Coen Brothers movie. I know you always get their the sense of their touch on films, but this is definitely very musically driven and, as always, dialogue driven. Yeah,
pretty much. It's a movie that I wouldn't necessarily seek out. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that I would necessarily describe as up my alley before watching it, but I definitely really enjoyed it. I mean, it's like I said, they basically had an image for what they wanted to do in their head, remaking the Odyssey as this kind of slapsticky sort of comedy, very niche, very quirky, very kitschy. They set out and they did it, and they didn't it doesn't try to be anything more than that, which is just fine. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. Very enjoyable. I'm sure I'll watch it again at some point. It's very, very niche, and like I mentioned, maybe some fat to trim out there as far as storylines wise. But I mean, even some of the way they threaded the storyline, I thought was pretty impressive, with the way that the politicians are kind of introduced early on, and then the KKK gets introduced much later on, and then you find out that obviously the politicians are the KKK, and then like the Everett story, the way that it was revealed that he has a family kind of late on, I thought was pretty cool. So even though it is kind of a little straightforward in that sense, there are also some unconventional things they do with the storytelling, which I enjoyed. So yeah, overall 8 out of 10 for me. Very, very enjoyable kind of watch. I think my one word review on Twitter, I'm sure I'll write a longer one at some point. But yeah, my one word was just delightful. Delightful little movie.
Delightful. What a delight.
Oh, yeah.
As Jake has mentioned, we have our blog on our site. If you go to our Twitter account, I'm sure you can find our blog. We basically are doing a review for each movie that we watch, and Jake's been killing it with these long reviews. I've been reading some of these.
Cool, man. I appreciate that you're enjoying them. I know that I'm pretty much speaking into the void with them a little bit, but I just want to get back to the writing, exercising that muscle again. That's something that I've always really enjoyed doing. I think I'm pretty good at. That's kind of what got me into doing this for the most part. So definitely trying to write as much as I can. As far as the movies that I'm watching, I've got a little bit of a backlog piling up here, so I'm probably not going to be writing about every single one, but this is one I might want to put some thoughts down on paper for.
Yeah, same goes for me. I'm probably not going to do every single movie. I still, want to do a blog post probably every couple of days or so. Just did The Lobster last night, which is, as we mentioned before, really strange. But it's definitely, if you get to some of the thematic, ideas of the movie, it's pretty brilliant in my opinion. But with these movie reviews, we've done Inglourious Bastards, we've done Hell or High Water, we've done White Man Can't Jump, and now Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Jake, it is your turn to select the next movie. Do you have one in mind?
I do. I think it's one that you were actually telling me about recently, and it's one that friend of the show, Kevin, my buddy who actually lives out in LA, in Hollywood.
Wow.
He's a big fan of. He's been pushing me to go ahead and check out. It is Donnie Brasco.
Oh, I like it.
Another one I haven't seen. I'm kind of trying to stick with ones I haven't seen at first here. So very excited. Big Al Pacino guy, big Keanu guy, big Madsen guy. It looks like an absolute cartoon of a movie, and I'm very excited to check it out.
So it's actually Johnny Depp in that role, and not Keanu.
Okay.
But I saw it probably about a month ago or so. It actually ranked pretty low on my rankings. Not gonna lie, I think it tried to be Goodfellas so badly, but I think it is definitely worth a rewatch. Looking forward to it. Gangster movies, probably my favorite genre. I would assume they're your favorite or next to favorite. Donnie Brasco, definitely looking forward to it. And Al Pacino in the mid-90s, you can't beat it with Heat. We got to do that at some point, but good stuff.
Yeah, we certainly will. So, sorry to make you revisit a movie that you did not like very much.
Full disclosure, I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is very low for me. Definitely, I'm hoping to improve the score, so I'm going to give it a second chance. But
okay, I mean, I feel like that's a running theme with this, is giving movies second chances and revisiting them to see if there's anything that you did enjoy. But shout out to Kevin. I'm sure he's going to be listening to that one. I think he's been listening to each episode we've released so far. So shout out to you, buddy. Hope you're doing well out there in La La Land.
Well put. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, man, this was a fun one. Wrapping up here on a Tuesday night. Gonna try to get back to our Sunday night schedule, but I had a long weekend, had a couple busy days here with the day job. So yeah.
Happy belated birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's actually my birthday week. I'm a birthday week guy. So if anybody wants to reach out to me on social media at Jake Luke, Louque is how you spell that last name, to wish me a happy birthday week, please go to it.
If you want to wish me a happy 6-month birthday, you can reach out to me at mpine_, and I will appreciate it.
Awesome. And you can follow the show at Bingo Pod on Twitter, and That's a Bingo Podcast, all one word, on Instagram. Like we mentioned, we've got our blog post going up on our Wix site, which you can find on our social medias. It's pretty much linked everywhere there. So check all of that out. Thanks for checking this episode out, and stay tuned as we move forward here with Donnie Brasco coming up next week. It's on Netflix, I believe. So check it out on there.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Appreciate you guys listening as always.
Absolutely. Peace out.
Booyah.